the bosses and the leaders that you have, or the managers that you have, however you title them, in the beginning of your career, set the foundation for the rest of your career.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here.
I think I've told you this before, but when I interview guests for the show, I don't really know what the title is going to be or what the theme is going to be. I love the anticipation. Once I press record, every guest takes us on a unique journey. My next guest, Nancy Atufunwa, Director of Marketing for USA Water Polo, took us on such a great journey. She is 100% honest, and I promise you, this conversation will make you pause and think about your approach to several things, including saying no, the way you lead and manage your teams, as well as how your company shows up in the community. Also, make sure you stick around to the end when she talks about the work she does with the Olympics, and she shares some advice for those of you who are looking on ways to get your foot in the door with the Olympics. All right, friends, let's do this. Nancy, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, take us back in time before we dive into your incredible experience and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
I was a student at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and the university at the time just wasn't super diverse. And most of the students that looked like me at the time were primarily student athletes. So you develop friendships with these individuals and you want to support each other in everything that you're doing. So I found myself a lot going to football games, basketball games, track events, supporting my friends. And the more and more time I spent there within the sports space, I started volunteering for the athletic department and then starting to realize that this could be some sort of a career. I knew I never wanted to be in a traditional office setting because that just wasn't my personality. I like my days to look different every single day. So being in a traditional office setting just was a challenge for me. And as I got further and further into the space of sports, I realized that it could fulfill what I was looking to do in my career.
So you weren't playing. Did I get that right? But you were cheering everyone on.
I actually did cheer for quite a bit of time in middle school, high school. And my freshman year of college, I was what you would probably say like a practice squad member, but I hated it. It was mean girl environment for me. And I was just like, this is not where I want to spend my time. So I left and just really focused on being a fan. I did come back to cheering in a different way through my job at Conkey Sports and Entertainment with the Colorado Crush. And they had a junior cheer program where it was young girls and then girls that kind of wanted to cheer in the professional space with a professional team after they graduated high school. I was kind of the director of that program and initiative that they had.
So you found your love of sports through being a fan.
Basically, yeah, I was a fan. I had so much fun when I was a cheerleader in high school, cheering on in middle school, I played a bit of golf and competed there, but didn't continue it after middle school. My fault. But yeah, I just always enjoyed the energy of sports. I'm very big on energy and having positive experiences and having fun. And I just always felt that when I was cheering, or if I was watching a sporting event on TV, or if I was physically present cheering on a team. I just always felt good energy. And I love that. And I try to thread that through everything that I do.
Now tell me. Now, what I know about cheerleading, and I'm going to say this, and I might get some really mean emails or angry emails, but when I was growing up, I didn't understand like cheerleaders. I was just like, what? Get on the field, do something else. Like, why are you cheering on the men, right? Because you only focused on where I came from. It was just you only cheered for the men's sports or the boys' sports, and I just didn't understand it until I saw the cheerleaders go to Florida. Or I saw it on like, I think, my school went and I watched it on TV and I was like, oh, this is a different level. This is a sport. I was wrong. I can't, like, they're so talented. So did you do stuff like that too, where you would like compete on a national level?
Yeah. So our high school was different, where we actually cheered on everyone. So we cheered not just football, basketball, women's basketball, we cheered at volleyball, women's volleyball, we cheered at gymnastics.
See, I like that.
We were literally, I think we were even at golf as well. So, right. So we cheered at everything, although you have to be quiet at golf. So it was just our presence there and feeding out the good vibes. But we competed at the state level. A lot of those teams that you see in Florida, there's a lot of like tumbling requirements and things of that sort. And that wasn't a skill set that everyone on our squad possessed. So we would compete at the state level and have a great time. But when you saw like the national championships, those teams were developed specifically to compete at the national championships. And we were ambassadors of our school. That's kind of how we were developed and viewed as.
I love that. Ambassadors of your school. And if I went to your school, I would view cheerleading back then, young Jahaan would have viewed cheerleading completely different because you were cheering on everybody, which makes more sense.
We were everywhere. So, and it was great because you got to learn about different types of sports, because you had to, like, if we cheered at wrestling, we had to know when to say, roll them over, lay them flat, pin their shoulders to the mat, right? At the right time. So we couldn't say that when their shoulders were getting pinned to the mat. So you learned a lot about the different sports. And now that I think about it, that probably lends itself into why working in the Olympic and Paralympic movement is so valuable and rewarding to me.
So tell everybody what you do now and who you do it for.
Yeah, so I've worked in the Olympic and Paralympic movement for the last 10 years of my career. And currently I work for USA Water Polo, where I'm the head of marketing. And I lead our efforts as it relates to branding, athlete marketing, partnership marketing, merchandising, and community engagement. Prior to USA Water Polo, I was on the brand and agency side, primarily supporting sponsors and creating strategies for sponsors who were partners of the US Olympic and Paralympic movement and the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee.
Now, when people hear Olympics, like I know there are a lot of people who are like, wait, what? She does what? They might even pause this and be like, how do I contact her? So how did you get there? Was that a dream of yours to be in that space?
There's a woman who is a family friend of ours who has basically been in my life since I was born. And she kind of took up the role of a grandmother figure in my life. My grandparents on both sides resided in Nigeria my entire time. So coming here, they came as often as they could, but she was, just a constant presence as well. But she was also the first Black female executive for the US Olympic Committee, what it was called then, the US Olympic Committee. And I remember starting about my senior year of college. She would say to me, we're going to get you an internship with this national governing body, or I'm going to reach out to this national governing body and you can intern there and see if you like it. Or let's see who has a job. And I would be like, no. And she would always ask me like, why? I was like, I don't want to live in Colorado Springs. That was literally my only pushback. I was like, I don't want to live in Colorado Springs. I love big cities. It's not for me. I don't want to do it. Well, when I joined IMG back in 2010, they had a sponsor who was interested in becoming a partner of the USOPC. And that was my entree back in. And it made her super happy. My family adored it. My parents, because they understood so much more about the Olympic and Paralympic space. My parents were into sports in general, but they really leaned into the fandom of the Olympic and Paralympic movement when I joined. And so it was great. And that's kind of how I found my way back in. I was definitely resistant in the beginning, but I found another entry point that satisfied my passion for or an interest in working in that space, but also my desire to live in a large city because I was living in Chicago.
So were you afraid when you said no? Like you have a family friend, like everyone dreams of this situation. Like, oh, I wish I knew somebody who can get me in and help me get, my foot in the door, at least for an interview. Were you afraid when you said no?
I was 2021? No, I wasn't, because I didn't understand the gravity of like saying no. I mean, by this time I was also working at Kroenke Sports and Entertainment in community relations, in their community relations department. And Kroenke Sports and Entertainment is the holder of, well, so much more now, but the Nuggets, the Avs, the Rapids. They have so many more things now, but that was at the time. And I was bouncing around from team to team during my time there, working in community relations, eventually doing ticketing in my final year. I had that job. It wasn't hard for me to get that job. And so I didn't understand at that time the challenges that people had getting into the sports industry because it was all so simple for me, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So saying no, I felt like she asked me if I wanted a glass of water. And I was like, no, I don't want it. So I didn't understand at the time, but I do get it now.
Maybe it was a good thing that you didn't recognize it because you kind of get in your head, right? And you kind of tell yourself a story when you do realize the challenges of trying to get a job, working in sports.
Yeah, it was just very all organic for me. So I like people. And while at Kroenke, there was some overlap with my role with the Broncos, the Denver Broncos. So I started working for them as well in my final time with those organizations and developed relationships there and started reporting to the senior vice president of special projects. And I say my final time because I decided to go to graduate school. And I ended up selecting the University of Louisville, who had a really strong sports management program, sport administration program at the time, and was so friendly with my SVP that it turned out he was friends with the athletic director at the University of Louisville. So I ended up getting a job in the athletic department at the University of Louisville. I was their full-time graduate assistant, and then that role wove to a new role with their in-house agency, Nelligan Sports Marketing, who sold their commercial rights. I focused on fulfillment of those partnerships, but also I ended up doing game entertainment or leading those efforts of game entertainment for football and men's basketball. And so now I'm spending time with these teams and these coaches that have really big personalities. And once I graduated from grad school, I knew I wanted to leave Louisville and ended up at Boston University with the help of Coach Rick Pitino, because that's where he started his coaching career. I've been fortunate because very early in my career, it was easy to kind of figure it out and get roles. And I think that actually helped me grow because to your point, I wasn't second guessing any no. I still didn't understand the concept of no at that time. I remember when I decided to leave Louisville and Nelligan, and my boss at the time, he was like, hey, there's an opening in Middle Tennessee, in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I was like, no. Like,
I don't know Tennessee that well, but I think I would have been like, no, I'm not going to thrive there. That it just doesn't. Nope.
Well, and it was funny because unlike what I like to affectionately call my American grandmother, whereas she just moved on after I said no, he was like, I'm going to make you like this place. We took a road trip down there and was able to do some business at the same time. And I was like, I can't believe you think I would be interested in in being here. And so that's kind of when he finally like let it go. Cause I think he saw my face when we got out the car and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, if you think that I would thrive here. So
what made you think it was so easy? Like, what was that feeling? What were you? I want to get to the root of that because I feel like it may help other people.
I think now when I look at it, I maybe feel like it was so easy because I know how much people struggle to try to get into the space. But it was also, I think, so easy for me because I was like, if this doesn't work, I'll find something else I like. Whereas I think a lot of people are like, it's all or nothing. I know when I talk to people who are starting out in their career or I'm interviewing them for jobs, opportunities that I might have, a lot of them talk about like, it's this or bust, like it is sports or bust. And I just never thought that way in the beginning. I was just like, I'll find something else. My career journey might sound a little crazy, but I was doing so many different things at that time. I mean, also in college, I worked in cosmetic surgery for my entire 4 years. So my job was to register the patients, collect payment, after a little bit of time, do like MPO status. And that's basically telling a person when they have to stop eating and drinking and about their meds and kind of supporting the nurse in that. So I did that at the same time I was an intern at Kroenke Sports because my internship was not paid and they paid. So I was able to balance that. And Kroenke Sports, my bosses there were awesome because that was my first taste of working from home. I only went into the office on game days and maybe once during the week. They let me work from home.
What?
Yeah.
Tell everyone what year this was when you were working as an intern from home. As
an intern, I was working from home probably in 2002 and 3.
Wow. COVID aside, it's a struggle for sports organizations to allow people and to give them that flexibility to work from home. So 2002 is unheard of.
Yeah, and I actually didn't ask for it. They just didn't want me on the road like that. They just didn't think it was safe to be bustling between downtown Denver and Boulder constantly. So yeah, I went in once a week and then my games.
Wow. And how many hours were you working a week?
I don't know, probably like 10 to 15 hours and then probably about the same at the hospital. I was insane to where I mushed all of my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I took a complete full load and I'd start at 8 a.m. and probably wrap up about 6 on Tuesdays and Thursdays of classes. So I had my Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for my internship and my job. And, you know, with your internship, you can work whenever during the day if you're working from home, right? They're just giving you projects to work on. And as long as you complete them by the timeline, they weren't clocking me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So you said you have you had a good relationship with like executives and your bosses at Kroenke, but you're working from home and you're going in on game days. How did you make sure you had a good relationship? How did you show the value that you were bringing as an intern? I think just even showing the value when you're there every single day as an intern is a challenge in itself.
Yeah, I think it starts from the interview process, right? Like it starts in that moment when you're interviewing and kind of trying to demonstrate your value. Looking back, I've kind of always been myself for the most part. There's obviously been challenges where I haven't brought my full self to work, but in the beginning, you don't know any better. And I was bringing my whole self to work, and my work was amazing, and people enjoyed working with me, and I enjoyed working with those people. And it just continued to elevate from there, right? So that's how I ended up working with so many different teams. I would complete one team and I'd get a call and say, hey, so-and-so wants you to take on the Rapids for the season. And I remember the first time that happened, I just wrapped up, I think, the Colorado Crushes season. And typically at Cronky Sports was really good with work-life balance. That's where I learned about half-day Fridays when your team wasn't in season. And they did a lot of fun things to try to keep the staff engaged with golf outings or different company activities. So I was like, cool, half days are coming up. That means nothing to an intern, right? Like there's no half day Friday, but I was super geeked for this half day Friday. And I got a call from my boss and said, hey, you are going to work for the Rapids now in the foundation for their season. And I remember saying like, hold up, I want my half day Fridays. Like what's going on? And they're like, you don't even get half day Friday. Like, what are you talking about? Working for the Rapids is where I actually found a passion for soccer. I had hated it my entire childhood because my dad loved soccer. So it was on all day, every day, especially in the weekend. And I was like, I can't do this. But being around the team, it's such good energy. The games are actually really fun. The fans are fun. And that's where I decided I love soccer too. That's when I added it to my toolkit of sports that I like. So I think I was just always myself. And part of being myself is always wanting to do a good job.
Okay, so you were yourself. You showed up virtually and in person once a week, or when there was games. You just showed up as 100% you because you didn't know anything else. Do you think, and this may come off weird, but I'm just going to say it. Do you think not being around everybody every day, or those couple of hours a week, 3 days a week in the office helped you still show up as yourself? Does that make sense? Like you weren't seeing and hearing other people and how they were acting and what they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right. I think my internship class, I remember this one incident. So I was the youngest in my internship class. For this program, they typically took graduate students, and I was still an undergrad. And there's this assignment that we had to do every week, and someone had to lead it every single week. And I've always struggled with group work because, as we've seen with this pandemic, not everyone pulls their weight. And so I remember feeling like this girl wasn't pulling her weight. Our job was to host events, promotional events. And it was getting too close to when hers was done. And I just felt more of a responsibility to the organization than I did to the project not being done. So I just organized something myself and turned it in for the group. And I remember this woman, my internship mate, calling me very upset and like said some not nice things to me. And I said to her, I can't believe you called my house phone saying this to me. There was something about her calling my house phone at the time, because, we all had house phones.
Yeah.
There's something about her calling my house phone that rubbed me the wrong way. So we had a very elevated conversation, if you will. And then after that conversation, I remember calling my boss and I said, hey, so FYI, this just happened and this is how I felt. And this is what she said. I was like, feel free to connect with her to hear her side. Yeah, I'll see you Saturday. And so,
yes.
and they were like, okay. Yeah, it's just always been being myself and being truthful when it comes to my work and everything else that I do. And I remember that Saturday when we had a game, she had actually told the president of the team, and they both came to see me and they thought it was funny. They were like, your whole approach to it was hilarious to us. The fact that you had this very elevated conversation with some disagreement with someone, and then you just picked up the phone like literally right after and said, hey, so this is what happened. This is what I said. This is what I believe she said to me. And just wanted to give you a heads up and enjoy the rest of your day. So
yeah, I learned that lesson not as an intern, maybe like a manager that like, oh yeah, you got to give your boss the heads up, and for no other reason, just over communicate and just make sure they know and they're not surprised. And here's what happened. Here's my side. And I love that you said, here's what happened. Here's my side. Feel free to hear, listen to what she has to say as well. And you picked up the phone as an intern. Like I would have been like, oh my God, I'm so scared. What do I do? Like that's pretty incredible.
I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. When you work in the medical space, like, so I'd been there for 4 years, you have to communicate everything, right? Or else, because there's people's lives that are in everyone's hands, even my hands who could not handle blood. If I gave the wrong MPO status or communicated something the nurse told me not to communicate, that can cause problems. And that's a person's life, right? That those problems could be attributed to. So I think working in such a honest environment as a medical field, I didn't know any different in the sports field. I didn't understand office politics. Obviously, there's office politics in medical, but I didn't understand the concept of office politics or the concept of being passive aggressive. I mean, I still don't. Because you have to speak fully in that moment when you're treating patients. That's probably why, because that's where my time was spent. And so I just brought it with me. Yes. That's where my in-person time was, right? So I'm going to the center, the medical center, a few times a week. More time in person there than in person, during my sports internship.
Yes. And you had great experience, and you're just an intelligent woman. So that obviously is a big factor in it as well. Like that makes a lot of sense.
And I think honestly, my best friend said this to me recently. When you do a good job in your work from a professional standpoint, that gives you a little bit more leeway in how you're able to communicate, right? So like, I don't have to be as passive aggressive or hold back if I have an opinion, as long as it's communicated respectfully, right? Like I think sometimes, and I've noticed this with people I've worked with in the past or people that I've been responsible for leading, they're messing up in a certain area or having a challenging moment in an area, their communication is restraint.
Say that one more time. The advice that your friend gave you?
It wasn't really advice. It was just more so like you wouldn't be able to like have the voice that you have if your work wasn't backing it up. Was her opinion.
Yeah. And I 100% agree.
Yeah. It made me pause because sometimes I wonder, shouldn't you have an opinion if you're having a challenging moment in your work? Because maybe that is an important time to speak up. So I don't know. I kind of went back and forth with it. I still go back and forth with it.
I was going to say, I was like, well, now that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you should. But it's so hard. Like you said, like some people don't want to talk about it and get quiet.
They don't want an additional flashlight when they're in those periods, right? They don't want a flashlight on them more. But I've learned in having to guide careers of people I've reported me to, sometimes that's when it's the most needed. Sometimes they're hurting. You just don't know where it's coming from.
Yes. I always tell people you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And having those difficult conversations. And
I've never shied away from a challenging conversation. Unfortunately.
I 100% have. And then lucky enough in my career when I started, I had a boss that would call me out if I did, or friends that would call me out. It didn't make it any easier. And some I still ran from, but it's a skill. I will say this, once you do it once, it gets easier and easier, just a little bit every single time. And then you look back and you're like, oh, what was I afraid of? Like, it feels so good. This is liberating. This is how we should all communicate.
Exactly. And I think lucky for me is early in my career. So just like when you're a baby and those moments with your parents are important because they build the foundation for the rest of your life. The bosses and the leaders that you have or the managers that you have, however you title them, in the beginning of your career, set the foundation for the rest of your career. And I had those people in spades, right? They ensured that I never lost my voice. They ensured that I understood kind of what it meant to advocate for myself. They ensured I understood that they nurtured that I had a desire for like professional excellence, and they understood that I like to be challenged. So they nurtured the best of me and also helped me understand my growth opportunities. I mean, one of my bosses early in my career, I was talking to him, it was like, it was last year. He called to check on me because we're in a pandemic. He said to me, your gift and your curse is the moral ethics that you have for yourself and for other people by always doing the right thing. And he said, I would see you struggle with that sometimes with the people that you encountered because you wanted them to match the morality that you have set in your mind that they should have.
Wow. Gift and a curse.
Yeah. And he was like, I always knew that your challenge was going to be balancing that.
How do you? I mean, do you agree with that? And do you struggle with that balance?
Yeah, when he said it, like a lot of moments in my professional career just started like flashing through my head. Sadly, on Friday, I was listening to one of DMX's last interviews, and there was something that he said. I used to say, meet people where they're at and continue forward. He said in this last interview, trust people to be who they are. So he was like, if they're a liar, trust them to be a liar. If they're mean, trust them to be mean, right? Trust people to be who they are. And I was like, that is such a more freeing sentiment to me than meeting people where they're at. Because when you meet people where they're at, you're still creating a vision of what you think they should be. Whereas if I trust you to be who you are, I'm just working within that.
Yes. Getting the chills over here.
Oh.
I really like that and did not think that I would talk about DMX this week on any of the podcasts that I've recorded.
And I think you have to take that mentality when you're like guiding people in their careers, if you have responsibilities for a team, right? So as a team leader, I want the best out of anyone who I'm responsible for. And if you ask any of them, they'll be like, yes, she does. But sometimes that while I may like guide each person differently based upon what they need to be successful, there's still the ultimate mentality that I want people operating at their best self. And what I've had to learn, when you trust people to be who they are, sometimes that's just not what that person wants. And so there's just a battle between what you want for that person and what their true reality and truth is. And so if you're guiding, and think of what the stress relief for you and that person, when you just let it go and just trust them to be who they are.
Dig deeper a little bit. How do you put that into practice? Yes,
it's hard, right? It's
right.
Very hard because you have to separate your goals for the person versus the construct of the work that they're providing, right? Let me pause for a second. So one thing I tend to do, like whenever I start at a new role and I'm responsible for individuals, when it comes time for reviews, I'm always like, what's the measurement threshold, right? So I want to be equated with, I want to measure my team on the same thresholds as my peers who also have leadership roles, right? Because I know for me that typically my threshold of success or being great is sometimes higher. And that's not fair for the individuals on your team to be judged at an even, and I say judged because that's kind of the essence of reviews, at a higher level than what the organization might be doing. So I always go in to try to level set and bring that back to a norm. But it's hard and it's painful because when you look at someone and you see more and they don't buy into it, it's hurtful because you're like, why aren't you seeing how great you are and this, that, and the third? But maybe they just don't want that. And that has to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it has to be okay. And I wonder though, how do you know the difference between, okay, they don't want that, but I'm going to push you a little bit here because...
I'm always going to push you in your actual job, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm with you.
Because that's important. There's still goals and business objectives to be met. So I'm always going to push you in your actual job.
Okay.
But I tend to, there was this wonderful young lady who had started working for me and really with me at a previous role. And she kind of started like in this admin type. She was like so smart and she hadn't finished college at the time. And I would give her these projects and it was just like mind blown, whatever she would create and turn back. We had a conversation like one-on-one and I said, whatever more means to you, you could have it. And I don't feel like you have the more that you've defined for yourself. And she enrolled back into college. I went to her graduation. I was crying because it was just beautiful to see her. Like she has defined what her more is and she's doing it. That never left me. And that is what I hope for each person that works on my team. But I have to remind myself not to define the more for them. And that's what goes back to trust people to be who they are.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. Not to define the more for them.
Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I'm sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram at jahaanblake, and let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here.
I mean, I keep going back to the meeting them where they are and / believe what they tell you, right? Like believe who they are.
Yeah. I just feel like for me, when I've met people where they are, I can still create a narrative and work to define their more again. Mm-hmm. If I trust you to be who you are, like I can't do that. That's how I rationalized it for me.
I think, but it's so good. And I picture, people who are listening and thinking, yes, I like this approach. I want to use this with my team or, the people who report into me. And then I think, or they may be thinking, wow, that's a lot. That's an investment. That's a lot of work as a manager, as a leader. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. And I'm not saying people should not do that, but it's a lot of work to get there.
It is. But I feel like when you're responsible for guiding a team, right? So in an organization, it's a construct of people who are working towards a set of business objectives and goals. You're rewarded for that work with a paycheck or bonuses or stock options or whatever. Once again, going back to this boss who talked about my morality, when I left the organization, he said to me, as you continue in your career, you are going to be responsible for the careers of others. And you have a responsibility to treat them in the manner that those that came before you treated you. And I had amazing bosses and leaders and managers from that point, from when he said that, right? So I was like, wow, I do have a responsibility because they poured so much into me. I remember when I first got to Louisville, my boss, I didn't leave the state of Colorado. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I went to Boulder, Colorado for college. So going to grad school was my first time living outside of the state. And my boss in the athletic department, I went to go visit a few weeks prior to go look for a place to live. She had a list of apartments printed out with the driving directions from the athletic department. And she said, I already called these places, negotiated your rent, go look at them, pick which one you want. And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like I had just had such good poured into me for those bosses. Now that hasn't meant I haven't had challenging bosses from that point, but like up until that point, I didn't understand. I had way more good than negative in terms of my leadership, way more good. Mm-hmm. So when he said that to me, I was able to receive that, and I received it deeply because I was like, yes, I drank all of that Kool-Aid when he said that. So I was like, yes, I've been treated so well. You guys have guided me. I always know I can call any of you if I have a problem, no matter what. And they did go out of their way to teach me lessons that would help me in my career. So when he said, you are responsible for the people that come after you, just like those that were in front of you were responsible for you, it was like a no-brainer to me.
Uh-huh. Yes.
But I took it too far, probably.
I don't know. Maybe we have to interview the people who work for you or who have worked for you. But to me, it's like, no, just that perfect example of the woman who printed out the directions and negotiated some rents and she put in the work. And to me, it sounds like you're putting in the work and it's coming from a sense of caring. Right?
Yeah, it really is. And I always hope that is how my teams have received that. It is from a space of caring. Ultimately, my only goal in life is to be happy. And I think I want that for other people. Sometimes you can tell someone's not happy, or sometimes you can tell someone's challenged, and I just always want to help. So professional development of my teams, I put a ton of energy into the programming. We read books, we do articles. The end of 2019, in preparation for what everyone thought was going to be amazing 2020, we did vision boards. I had our entire team do vision boards, and I met with each individual with my teammate because we kind of merged our teams, and we met with each individual one-on-one to go through their vision board and understand how we support them in achieving their vision board. And we told them we wanted their vision boards to be personal and professional. And then we were like, okay, how do we still optimize the work that needs to be done and help them be successful in achieving these goals?
So you had your team do like vision boards.
Yeah.
Personal and professional. And did you have them present them? Did you have like a vision board party? What'd you do?
So they worked on it individually because, obviously they're also peers, right? The teams are a set of peers, and you're also in a work setting. So they worked on them personally, and we met with each individual one by one personally.
Yes, I love that. So, one, I wish you made me do one. I have like a half one that I started in 2019. Maybe that's why 2020 was the hot mess. My vision board. But so you had them do this exercise. So you really got to understand your team. And I have to imagine that your team must be, I'm picturing this high functioning, loyal, badass team.
If I had to go through a pandemic, this was the team. We had to really produce at a very, very high level. Marketing and communications. We're a membership, USA Water Polo, like other national governing bodies, are membership-based organizations, right? So these people are paying almost like a subscription. Or someone very smartly said to me a long time ago, your members pay to be advocates of your brand, right? So I need to keep these advocates of our brand engaged. So we didn't have a moment to understand what being in a pandemic meant straight away. We launched a program called At Home with USA Water Polo. I think in the state of California, we were shut down on a Tuesday. That following Monday, we launched At Home with USA Water Polo. And it was 15 weeks, 200 pieces of new content over those 15 weeks. And we were just churning. I mean, this team, absolutely amazing.
Wow.
And we were in the trenches together, but apart because we're all at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the level of high functioning displayed by this team, I was blown away.
You worked hard. You put down that foundation and set it and just, I mean, every team has problems, but I can imagine working for you is when you're exhausted and you're going through a pandemic and it's scary and you don't know what's going on. It's like, okay, well, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm freaking out, but I have to do this. I want to make sure I do well by Nancy. I want to make sure I do well by my organization because they're so good to me, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone's freaking out, right? My parents are in Colorado. I have 2 siblings over in New York, and I'm like freaking out. Everyone's freaking out. And I think in that moment that, especially the first couple of months of the pandemic, in addition to being high functioning, our team was a source of care for each other. We have our weekly team meetings, and we would always make sure we would carve out time just for like casual conversation. We talked about the old black and white sitcoms we used to love growing up, like, you know, I Love Lucy and Mr. Ed. And so we would try to make sure we have fun so that everyone also knew that they weren't alone.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So we could talk about teams for days with you. This is great stuff. I think everyone would be mad at me if I didn't ask you to talk a little bit more about your role and like the involvement you had with like Olympics and like just what all that looks like from your side.
Yeah. So it looks different based upon the role that, you know, I hold. So right now at USA Water Polo, the focus is ensuring that the stories of our athletes are told, of our national team is told. I work very closely with our head of communication. That's the individual that I said we merged our team together. So we co-lead that team because it just makes sense in our minds. We tell the stories of our athletes visually through creative or, you know, through securing interviews or creating content against that. So it's really telling the stories of them to kind of elevate the interest of the sport within the US so that we may gain more young kids that want to try the sport of water polo, play the sport of water polo, or to continue the pride that our current members have of playing the sport of water polo. The sport's very monolithic when we think about it racially, social, economically, and sometimes geographically. And our goal as an organization right now is to really break that down and create spaces of equity, create spaces of diversity, and create an overall environment that's considered safe by these athletes, our members, and the parents of these athletes. That's really the focus and our continued goal right now. So my work, when anyone works within an NGB, a national governing body, the work is dual. You work on creating this narrative that focuses around our Olympic athletes or national team athletes is what they're called in a non-Olympic time. And then we work to engage our members to buy into this brand in this space, right? There are other water polo organizations. They don't fill the Olympic team, but there are others, and we want people to spend their time and energy with us. And that's being focused on being athlete first, athlete centric, focusing on athlete safety, and focusing on the fun of the sport. But I also like to focus on the access that the sport brings. water polo is played at some of the top institutions in the US. So that creates another opportunity for those that play the sport, which is why we're really focused on the equity and the diversity of it all.
Gosh, that's a big job.
Yes, but the great thing is I feel like as an organization, it's something that's important, has become increasingly important to everyone, especially the elevated launch of the civil rights and racial and social justice protests last year, right? Like, I think at that time, every professional organization and corporation had to look themselves in the mirror and understand the role that they were playing or were not playing and make a decision. If you weren't playing, to play and make things better and do your part, or continue as status quo. And I think we looked at ourselves and we had a lot of conversations and we decided to lean in.
Now, without being too nosy, because I know these conversations are private, but what was that like? I asked because I know there's certain organizations and certain people come to me and said, we talked, but we haven't done anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so what was it like to be, I guess, what were those conversations like on a high level?
If I'm honest, it was hard. I'm the only Black woman of color in our senior leadership executive level staff. I share that space with a Black man who's the only Black man of color. So at that level. So it was hard because you're in this monolithic space, right? You're making decisions that maybe you don't buy into at the moment because you haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. So I remember I had to write like a short essay about that moment. And I felt shattered at the time. It's almost I had to split myself into the professional side of me and then this very proud Black woman side, right? And so that time period was pretty tough. We now have a diversity inclusion task force. It's led by my colleague, who's our chief high performance officer, John Abdu. So he's played in the sport, he's coached at a high level in the sport, and now he's, chief of sport performance within the organization. So he's seen every component or type of the sport, which is important, but creates another layer because he's a man of color. He's a Black man. He's Egyptian. So with that group, it's comprised of retired Olympians who are of color, retired athletes who are of color. We have some current collegiate athletes that are insanely smart that are in this role, as well as parents who have a passion, who have amazing roles themselves in the DEI space or even in the legal space, right? Because everything has a legal component to it. We're very fortunate that these people have donated their time and energy to this topic. Through them, we've been able to establish a zero tolerance policy, which every policy is breathing, right? So as we look at ensuring that we are a safe space for any marginalized group, we'll have the opportunity to continue to expand that policy and define that policy for the moment. So that was a really big first step for me because we had never had one. So we'll continue with that. We'll continue with education. There's a systemic history to pools that not many people know of, which impacts the diversity of aquatic sports. A lot of pools were run down or, cemented during the 20s and 30s and the Jim Crow. Unfortunately, just like housing, I think pools were treated the same way when it comes to systemic oppression. So our role now is to try to dismantle that, right? Like that's a big job, or course correct all of that. And that is a lot of weight and a big job for everyone. And I think we're committed to it. We're looking at ways to bring the sport into underrepresented communities and neighborhoods. We have a great framework of an example from the city of Commerce here in California and what they've done in the city and how the city interacted with the sport of water polo and brought that forward. So they've given us such a great blueprint that we hope to work with other cities across the nation in replicating. It's just a lot, like ensuring the equipment is there, ensuring that those athletes of color or athletes who have a marginalized background have a safe space within the sport, and ensuring that they know that they are supported and have places to turn to when they feel challenged. So it's a lot of moving parts, but I think the aquatic sport community as a whole is dedicated to doing their part to make it better.
That's great. Oh my God, you guys are doing amazing stuff. Like, this is such good stuff.
You know, it's funny. You hear that, but when you're in it, you don't feel like you are, because you don't feel like you're doing enough. And that's one thing that I've struggled with over the last year is the concept of, I just want to break the boulder down. I'm not patient enough to chip at it. Mm-hmm. And you have to, when it comes to systemic laws, they were created generations ago that were then generationally upheld even today, right? So like in my head, I'm like, I just want to break that down now and not have to chip on it. But if you think of how long it was all those laws to oppress Black and brown and people of color were created, and then legally through laws and policies were upheld, that's hard. But in my head, I'm just like, it's not moving fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's hard.
I got to imagine that's hard. And if you look back over like what you've done in the past, 10 months? Yeah,
the team's amazing. It's just, I think in my head, you want to see the finish line, especially when you work in sports, right? You want to see the completion. Our DEI task force team, they really are moving mountains, but it's tough when you want to get the gold medal and complete the journey. And not complete the journey, right? Because equity is something that I feel like will need to be threaded through how we operate business for generations to come. But whatever you define as big gains is what you want to see.
Man, thank you for sharing all that with us and giving us a really big sneak peek behind the curtain.
It's fine. And to still answer your question, because I didn't really, I went in a whole different direction. So in the Olympic and Paralympic movement, from a career perspective, so I have my role at USA Water Polo with marketing, but in the past, what I've done is I've worked with brands to articulate their business objectives and goals and KPIs essentially through the lens of the Olympic and Paralympic movement. That work has included negotiating deals, whether it be with these large entities like the USOPC or athletes, securing athlete rights, securing the rights from NGBs, looking at the strategy of how we're going to activate the Olympic and Paralympic assets that we have as a brand, and then ensuring that that still ladders up once again to the business objectives and goals, and that there's measurable KPIs of that. And ultimately figuring out how we thread that concept of doing well by doing good through all of that work. The Olympic and Paralympic movement is really about friendship and coming together. And so it's important that those things are threaded through the work.
Now, you just gave me some really good information, or everybody who's listening, some really good insight into what it's like to work on the Olympics, the Paralympics. And I'm about to ask you just a basic question. How do people, I'm sure you get this all the time, the people who want to be a part of the Olympics, where should they start? What should they do? Especially in a role like yours, I hear it all the time. I want to be in marketing or partnership, the community side. What would you tell them?
Yeah, there are so many entry points. I think people don't really realize that the reason to be, especially in the US, of the Olympic and Paralympic movement is youth sports, right? Like you have to have a pipeline of athletes that's something we talk about a lot in this space, especially within these sports, right? They're not professional. The majority of these sports are not professional sports within the US. They're wildly professional internationally, but it just hasn't reached that level yet. So it's very important that we have a pipeline of athletes to continue to be able to field a team at the Olympic level. And that starts with our splash ball program, where we introduce the sport of water polo to kids, and they're 5 to 8 years old. And that goes into youth play and then competitive play. I say those two things because within our organization, we have broken down. There's been a ton of research done about when kids should specialize within sport. And that's kind of around their age of 13. So for us, like youth play is under 13, competitive play is over 13. So under 13, we don't really give medals, or you'll know who's the winner, but it's not something that we promote. Whereas when you're in competitive youth play, there's medals, there's podiums, there's fanfare around the winners. So we've been very deliberate about that within the sport of water polo. So then from competitive youth, athletes go on to college, and then hopefully they start making one of our national team rosters. But youth sports, if there's no youth sports, it just does not work for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really the quickest way to get in, right? But you can volunteer time, you can obtain roles within that. You can, agency work is, I think, a great way to learn and to get into different sports as well. Because you see so much when you're at an agency, because there's client needs are so vast and different. I mean, IMG is my favorite agency that I've ever worked for, which is now Endeavor, right? So I did government work while I was at IMG. I did my Olympic and Paralympic work. I did some other international work because of my Olympic work. So I got to see so many different things. And that actually really helped me understand that I liked being in this space. It didn't mean that I had to work in this space, right? So like right now, I also am a committee member for USA Handball. So I sit on their nominating and governance committee. Being on a volunteer board is another way to get into this space and to work in this space, because who knows what my future holds for my career. But the biggest thing that I've learned is there's different ways to be in a space that I enjoy.
Yes, that's perfect advice. I think that's fantastic. Fantastic advice. I have another question for you.
Of course.
Are you ready for the rapid fire question portion of the day?
Oh, okay. It's rapid fire. Okay. Gosh, this is always so hard. Okay, go ahead.
Well, you seem like we're storytellers. So this is why this episode's going on so long, is because we like to talk and tell stories. So, but the rapid fire, 12 questions, first thing that comes to your mind, you're not allowed to overthink it.
Okay.
What is your favorite sports moment?
Gosh, it wasn't a moment, but it wasn't like a sporting event. It was when I touched down in London for my first physical Olympic Games. I arrived in London. We were going to be there bulk of the summer. And as soon as I got off the plane, I felt the energy. It drove my boss a little crazy, because as soon as we got to the flat, I took a shower and left. And I was like, I'm out of here. And he's like looking for me, thinking I'm like asleep or something, and, trying to catch up from the fatigue of the flight. And I remember he called me and he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at USA House already." And he's like, "You didn't unpack?" I was like, "Did that, showered. Now I'm here. I'm excited. Let's do it."
I love that. That's a great moment. Okay. What is something people always get wrong about you?
Gosh, besides my last name, honestly, it's the same thing that I think all Black women suffer from, is that title of like angry Black woman if you're having like a bad day. The level of gaslighting that goes into that. I know this is rapid fire and I'm totally failing at rapid fire right now, but the gaslighting that goes into that narrative is so mentally damaging and exhausting.
Yes. Mentally damaging is a great way to describe it. It's hard to transition into the next question because it's not serious, but what is one food you wouldn't want to give up?
Avocados.
Are you a morning or a night person?
Both, depending on what needs to be done.
What's your favorite holiday?
Christmas.
So you're getting the hang of this. What job would you absolutely be horrible at doing?
Oh, I already know. In the operating room, because I have a story for this. So, and I'm going to break the rapid fire again. So when I worked at the hospitals, Boulder Community, my bosses were trying to find ways to elevate my role or expand my role. And there's some training that you can get to be in the operating room. So they were like, let's just see how you do in the vicinity watching the surgery. We go in and they are performing an augmentation, and I passed out. And so they're like, all right, girl, so you're going to go back to these NPO statuses and collecting these checks, and we're going to move on.
Yeah, that's bad. Okay. What product would you seriously stockpile if you found out they weren't going to sell it anymore?
It's all my face products. So I use a mixture, and I was not paid for this advertisement, but I am big on Ollie Hendrickson and pharmacy. And if they got rid of those, I would be gutted.
Good to know. I'm definitely linking to those in the show notes. What is your favorite app?
Probably Instagram, because when you're a marketer, your job is rooted in pop culture. And I think I get a lot of inspiration from Instagram.
Who is your biggest inspiration in life?
Oh, my great-grandmother. My maternal great-grandmother.
Got it. Okay. I'm really excited for the answer to this one. As a child, what did you wish to become when you grew up?
A lawyer. No, it was an interior designer first, then a fashion designer, then a lawyer.
Okay. And then last question, finish this sentence. The future of women working in sports is?
Bold.
Yes, yes, yes. This has been an amazing conversation. I could talk to you all day long. Tell me, how can people get in touch with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, pop my name into the search. You can find me on Twitter, same name, at Nancy Atufunwa. LinkedIn is at Nancy Atufunwa. Or our staff roster is public at USA Water Polo. So you can find me there and shoot me an email.
You're also the vice president of WISE. Did I get that right?
Yes, vice president of the WISE LA chapter.
Ooh, tell us more about that as well.
Yeah, so WISE is an organization that was created just about 30 years ago to focus on the advancement of women in sports and events, to provide professional guidance and tools to ensure women had success, and that the number of women in the space grew. More than ever, that's still a need, but especially at WISE LA, we're really focused on supporting all women. And when I put that emphasis on all, it's really any woman who identifies themselves as a woman. What we've learned through our research and our work within the chapter is, and just through reading about other female-based organizations, is even though they might be diverse, they sometimes consciously or unconsciously over-index in supporting cisgendered white women. And so we want to make sure that all women, through gender identification or racial, socio, or geographic, feel supported within the organization, and we can continue to grow women, provide safe spaces and support system, as well as the tools that they need to achieve their defined success.
So for WISE, how can someone become a member? What should they look up? I can include it all in the show notes.
So to learn more about WISE, you can visit our national website at wiseworks.org. And from there, you could figure out what chapter is nearest you and learn more about the organization and the many programs that we have going right now, including leadership development and mentorship.
Fantastic. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.